Hi, Eve. Good to see you.
Nice to see you. Nice to be here. Can I test one thing? I want to see if you can hear my bell. You can never
Sure.
tell settings. So let's just see. No.
I wasn't. Did anybody else hear? Did anybody else hear it? Because sometimes I know my sound. No. Getting a no from Brenda, and no from Jill.
Can I test one thing? I want to see if you can hear my bell. You never
Sorry. Were you trying the original sound off and on, Eve?
Yeah, I just made it. Did you hear that one?
I was
No,
fussing with something else. Did anybody else hear it?
it's okay. I won't use it.
Yeah. Oops. Let me get that record.
Should I give folks a minute or two more?
You would think after years of being on Zoom most of my life, I would learn to use the. But yeah, it takes like up to maybe 4 minutes for folks to gather. So you can either just start slowly and folks will join us and but yeah.
Good.
I think it's safe to start now, Eve.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. So delighted to be here with you all. Can you hear me pretty well? Great. So I am Eve Ekman. I use she, her pronouns. I'm here in San Francisco, and the beautiful lands of the Miwok and the Ramaytush Ohlone people. I feel very fortunate. I grew up here, not only in San Francisco, but actually in this neighborhood. So I feel so delighted to be part of Mission Dharma, based here in my hometown, in these lands I feel so connected to and love so much. And I am such a big fan of Mission Dharma. I spent many, many years sitting with Howie and many of you, and just delight in this community still coming together and the kind of longevity of community here. And whether this is your first night here, I doubt that's the case, or you've been here for many, many years, just So much appreciation for your practice, for your dedication, and being together in community. I'm a contemplative social scientist, so I study and care deeply about practices of meditation and how they support well-being, prevention of burnout, understanding ways that folks can specifically use an awareness of their emotions to improve their ability to be with difficulty and savor more of what's enjoyable in life. I have worked for the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley, as well as in private industry, places like Apple, supporting their well-being efforts to create technology that doesn't just drain us, but makes us actually more aware of who we are and more connected. And I am very fortunate to be the recipient of incredible teachers. I just want to name them briefly. Alan Wallace was one of my root teachers, beautiful author, scholar in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. I think he's written 45 books, which is kind of unbelievable. He's a translator of ancient Buddhist texts. I'll be calling a lot on his work tonight. And I am currently very fortunate to sit with Jennifer Wellwood, who's a teacher in a whole variety of traditions, but largely Dzogchen and Mahamudra, and feel very lucky as a student. And then I myself am a teacher, and I hold a Wednesday night sit at the San Francisco Dharma Collective in San Francisco, which is just in the Mission District. Sometimes Howie has his half days there. We have a really sweet little center on Alabama. And yeah, just delighted to be here with you all. This evening, we're going to focus on something that might be a little unexpected. I'm going to focus on joy tonight and the importance of joy and understanding joy and its relationship to happiness and our practice. And also, its essential quality always, but I think in times when our attention can be drawn everywhere except for joy, it's a good reminder to consider its value. And before we start, I just want to give us a little bit of a primer because our meditation will endeavor to create a place of refuge that includes joy through our sense portals, through our imagination. And one of my inspirations for this is the Book of Joy. Anyone here read that book? With the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. It's a beautiful book and conversation between these two wisdom holders. And one thing I love that they distinguish is they talk about the difference between joy and happiness. And they say that joy is a state or a way of looking at the world that's actually independent of external circumstances and suffering. And that joy is not simply a feeling, but a deeper, more enduring way of life that can be cultivated deliberately through practices of compassion, gratitude, and acceptance. So we'll dig into those themes a bit, but I wanted to highlight, I'm very fortunate to have had contact and connection with His Holiness the Dalai Lama through some projects I did in the context of contemplative science. And he is so easy and ready to joy. Maybe some of you have experienced that, but it's not as though he's suppressing what's difficult to be there. It's just he's allowing this free flow of emotions and allowing the reality of delight, which is truly always all around us, to be a primary focus for him. Again, not at the exclusion of sorrows. And interestingly, I didn't know as much about Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Some of you may know, but the documentary and the book that came out about this meeting, I think it came out just about 4 years ago, maybe now. And, Archbishop Desmond Tutu was just a huge activist against the apartheid in South Africa. And both of these men, they have seen so much suffering, so much difficulty, so many horrors of the political state. And they choose, really, whenever possible, to engage in this conscious, conscientious act of joy. And not just as a kind of escapism, but as this choiceful way of living that will allow, you know, all that is needed to arise with ease. So I just really admire that approach. And I think there's such beauty for us right now to consider the value and the importance of joy. If some of you just joined for a moment and heard me say joy, you might have just like logged right off, like, wow, that's tone deaf for this moment with all the suffering in the world. And I really want to encourage us to think of joy as like a mental hygiene, actually. Something that we need to do to exercise the mind and the heart so that we can show up over and over and over to the many horrors of this world and the many difficulties within our own lives, which are there too, right? And those who we care about. And this conscientious cultivation of joy, from my own work at UCSF, there was a beautiful study with longtime caregivers, folks for whom, maybe their partner or a beloved person in their life was suffering from long chronic illness. And a study of these caregivers over many years and what it did to these caregivers over many years at the cellular level, at the level of their telomeres, their aging, as well as their psychological well-being, meaning how they report. And one of the interesting parts of this study was the caregivers who experienced more moments of positivity or enjoyment on a day-to-day basis had more protection against that level of cellular aging and distress. Of course, we didn't study them before the caregiving burdens. We don't know, were they always just that resilient? But that has always stuck with me. There's an aspect of joy that contributes to our resilience. And I think it also contributes to our wisdom. It's never the case that everything is horrible. But I don't know about you all, I thought that a couple times today, checking the news. And so it helps us with our wisdom. It helps us with our resilience. And the way that we generate and cultivate joy, I mean, there's many. We'll talk about them after the sit. But in our meditation this evening, we're going to focus on two main sources of joy. And one is simply finding the pleasure in the practice of attending to our breath. So I know you all attend to your breath and have a practice of it for years, if not decades, but we don't always attend to the pleasure that actually can be in that simple practice. What part of attending to the breath feels good? And then just savoring and feeling the goodness of that. The second part of our practice, I wanted to give a little heads up, because sometimes in visualization practices, people really struggle to think of examples during the meditation. It seems like they're put on the spot. So I'm going to ask us to do two different forms of cultivating joy. And this is through mudita, through the rejoicing of the heart and the goodness of others. So I'm going to ask us to think of a very simple feeling in which we had that delight. You know, this could be something simple like yesterday I was in an airport and I saw this child, this young baby, looking out the window at the planes. And just the awe and wonder on that child's face lit me up. And everybody was waiting, saw that baby, like all of us lit up, right? That's just a simple delight. So I'm going to ask us to think of a simple delight in that way, something we rejoice in. And then the way that I learned mudita from my teacher, Alan Wallace, is not just the enjoyment of enjoyment, but the rejoicing in the virtue of others, the goodness, the way that people show up and act in courageous and compassionate ways. And this doesn't have to be heroic. It can be, just a everyday average, you know, making sure there's food on the table, taking extra time to care for children who need extra time. But like, what are the ways that we see this kind of, or can remember a rejoicing in the goodness of another's goodness? So these two different types. One is the simple delight from goodness in the world. And the second is this kind of quality of the goodness of others. In psychology, this is actually a phenomena that's called elevation. So this kind of moral emotion of feeling good about others who are good. So very easy examples would be His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Undeniably, well, in my opinion, undeniably good beings for the goodness they've made in this world. So before we get started, I'm hoping in the chat, someone can someone share in the chat anything that they've delighted in, or any person who brings them that sense of goodness. So we'll take a couple moments here and just kind of let's prime the pump together. Think of anything you've delighted in and anyone whose goodness makes you feel good. Lovely. Yes, Mary, you'd like to share live. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Is my voice on, I think? Yeah, okay, good. Well, I had a really good day today, and I've been feeling, a little depressed with the news. I keep up on it a lot, but there's been a lot of bad news. But today was a great day. I started by doing Tai Chi in a beautiful park with all my compatriots that do it, which is one of my best times in the week or the day. And then I went to a thing at the county courthouse. There was a supervisors meeting, and it was a great community of local people that were initially protesting and then singing and arm walked in to voice support for the immigrant communities in our city and certain laws. And it was really a tremendous sense of community. I think we forget how powerful that is sometimes, because we're online and things like that. But being together in a space and everybody putting out a lot of positive energy like that and doing good work was really exhilarating.
Hmm.
And then I ended by going to the farmer's market and then coming here. It's a great day.
Thank
it,
you,
it
Mary.
annihilated all the bad news for today, at least.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for sharing the delight in so many forms, right? The movement, being with others, and then yeah, this earth and what it produces and the farmers. I delight in the farmers.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love going to the farmer's market. It's one of my joys. But I think it's so
Oh,
important.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna cut you off there just for a moment so we
That's
can
okay. We're
do
good.
the practice. I'm loving also what's coming in here in the chat. We have friendliness of strangers in my neighborhood, the earth waking up in spring, the sound of the birds, the sunny weather this morning that then turned into a wild windstorm. I don't know if anyone else noticed that. The joy of seeing a groundhog in our backyard, reveling in the dandelions and grass. I love that. The love of one's dogs. I feel that for my cats. The joy of like there's so much joy in the animals, rolling on her back in the grass to soak up the sun. Playfulness of my puppy. My pups, oh, there's a lot of dog lovers here. Okay, I like that. So soft nosing, my sister's tracking and recognizing family events, birth, marriages for dozens of us. Tiny migrating warblers aft at our bird feeder. Oh, how lovely. Those little yellow bandits. Our mayor accepted the invitation to meet with the anti-poverty mission. Amazing. And listened. Okay. See, there's so much, right? There's actually so much goodness that we can savor and bring in. And so these are all really beautiful examples, especially of the delight. And so we can also, in the practice, think of that goodness. That could be, as Mary was suggesting, the goodness and rejoicing in, peaceful protest, connection, that kind of goodness of others. And it is interesting, the mudita, that in some traditions it's much more, just rejoicing in goodness. And then there's other areas of tradition that it really focuses on rejoicing in the virtues and the goodness of others. So we're going to do both. Okay, we're going to cultivate both. So let's give ourselves a moment to settle into a posture that feels supportive and joyful. I like, in order to help kind of open up the chest a bit, to inhale the shoulders up to the ears and then exhale down the back slowly. I'm doing that twice more, inhaling up, exhaling back. One more time. Hmm. And then checking in on a balance of the posture. So feeling a sense of stability through the sits bones, and having them, if possible, tilt just a little forward so that the spine has its natural upright curve. And we could imagine the spine like that beautiful long stalk of a lily, very supple, very upright. And find a place for the hands to rest that feels balanced and at ease on the lap. This could be folded or hand pressing posture on the knees, and just making sure the shoulders feel comfortable with wherever the hands have landed. Inviting the head to rest gently on top of the neck, the chin just ever so slightly sloped downward, bringing even more uprightness through the spine. And feel, sense, or imagine a softening through the eyes, softening through the jaw, softening through the belly. And again, feel, sense, or imagine a softening through the eyes, a releasing through the jaw, and if it feels right, a tenderness, a warmth at the heart, and supported by a relaxation and stability through the belly. And as we invite our attention and awareness to fully saturate the body, we see if we can maintain a sense of brightness and vividness through the inhale, and then balancing that with a relaxation through the exhale. So finding that vivid, bright presence with the inhale, that ease, softness, gentleness with the exhale. And when the mind wanders, just seeing how you can notice and then relax, release, and return. Maybe even feeling a bit of rejoicing to just have found ourselves returning to the breath. And the next time the mind wanders and you catch yourself, see if you can notice just the subtle difference between the quality of attention and awareness when the mind's wandering and the quality of attention and awareness back in the breath and the body. Perhaps there will be a sense of a bit more contraction, maybe even tightness when the mind has wandered. And then returning to the fullness of this present moment in the breath, in the body. Perhaps there's a sense of openness and spaciousness in this present moment. Following the breath, either anchored at the subtle sensation of breath at the nostrils or at the belly or the whole body breathing. Notice whatever feels pleasurable or enjoyable in the breath. Maybe there's enjoyment with the breath traveling in, maybe enjoyment or sense of pause at the very end of the inhale. Maybe there's enjoyment in that release of the exhale. Noticing the quality of this enjoyment and where you feel it in the body, how it's experienced. Taking a moment and reconnecting to posture. Seeing that the face remains soft and at ease, providing some opening or undefending of the heart. finding that stability of the belly. And for a bit longer here, just noticing and finding refuge in the breath and whatever feels enjoyable in the practice of following the breath. Of course, discomforts are here too, pains and aches and otherwise. We don't need to get rid of them, push them away, but letting our mind linger on the sense, pleasure, or enjoyment we can notice also with the breath. Very gently shifting our attention and awareness from the breath and the body to the mind and imagination, and giving ourselves this great delight to bring to mind something we witnessed or experienced recently that brought a smile to our face, that made us feel a sense of joy. Maybe seeing a beloved furry creature reveling, maybe seeing the delight of the natural world through its blossoms and winged creatures. Give yourself a moment to think of just one experience and fully bring it to the forefront of your mind. And for a moment or two, recall that experience, event, whatever was observed or witnessed. And let the heart be gladdened. Let the heart delight fully. And taking a couple moments to notice what it might feel like in the body to turn attention and awareness towards this joy. And whether the sensations are strong or subtle, focus on the body. And for a couple moments, just be with this sense in the body of delight. And feel, sense, or imagine how many other beings may have delighted in something similar. Feeling that shared sense of humanity that is to be a feeling of joy. If we have some sense of that palpable, embodied sense of joy, we could imagine what it might feel like to radiate this sense of enjoyment, almost as though we were a lamp illuminating the space around us with the warmth of our joy. And shifting our attention and awareness now to imagining a being whose acts have this quality of goodness. This could again be a being who is well known on the world stage for their goodness. This could be someone we know, someone we've witnessed with their kindness, their compassion, their care, their efforts to bring about positive change. There could be many to choose from, but just choose one being who you delight in the goodness that they have brought to the world or into your life. Imagine them smiling in front of you, feeling the goodness of their presence. Well, of course, no one is perfect all the time, but imagining the best quality of this being when they are aligned with this highest virtue. For a couple moments, just really allow yourself to be saturated by this goodness, by recognizing this virtue in another being, letting it lift the heart. Considering the qualities of this being. Is it generosity? Is it clear seeing? Is it energy, compassion, creativity? And then taking a moment to consider whether these qualities also exist within you. And rejoicing in whatever aspect of these qualities you yourself exhibit, embody, inhabit, and extend to other beings. Notice once again the sensations in the body associated with reflecting on this goodness. The goodness in us, the goodness in this other being, and just feeling the field of goodness, these beautiful qualities. And coming fully back to the breath and the body. And feeling a sense of the posture once again, stability of the belly, softness of the heart, gentleness through the face. And then considering the possibility of offering up the benefit of this practice, whatever enjoyment or delight, whatever warmth that we were able to cultivate and generate. If it feels natural and comfortable, placing hands together in front of the heart and dedicating the goodness of this practice to all beings everywhere, that they too could know goodness and love and warmth, that all beings everywhere could have a sense of love and belonging, that all beings everywhere could be free from inner and outer harm. All beings everywhere could be free. And gently wiggling fingers and toes, and blinking eyes back open to our shared space. Thank you for your practice. I would be very happy to hear any questions or reflections um, on the briefer side, if possible. I want to chat more with you about joy and happiness. But if anyone has a question or reflection, they can put either in the chat or they can raise their hand. Love to hear how that practice was. Yes, Mary.
Yeah, I just appreciated it's just sort of infusing that sense of joy, how it sort of warms up the awareness, how
Mm,
sometimes awareness can get a little clinical.
yeah.
And and so just having that infusion of warmth into the
Mm.
awareness really just made it quite a bit more pleasurable than just like being so clinical about it.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I had the really good fortune to do a month long at Spirit Rock in February. And one thing I noticed on that retreat was one of my main practices is Dzogchen. Some of you may be familiar, which is kind of this, you know, open awareness, spacious awareness, non-dual awareness. And that for me, it was actually through bodhicitta, through the open heart of awakening for all beings, that that awareness was possible. And then you read in the text, especially the Dzogchen text, that there's no difference between Rigpa, so pure awareness, and ultimate bodhicitta. So actually, they are the same. That kind of awareness that's all permeating is infused with warmth. So beautiful. Thank you so much. Anyone else? John.
So I was able to bring to mind someone that I had an admiration for their kindness and their presence and their strength. And then you suggested that we feel those qualities in ourselves and bring those strengths or recognize them in ourselves. And I yawned. I pushed that away.
Oh.
So, which was really interesting. And then the next thing that happened was I started to cry a little bit in a few minutes later. So it was so interesting how viscerally that all affected me.
Mm,
So,
beautiful.
yeah.
Beautiful noticing too, just the way that energy moves and that kind of resistance. And guided practices with imagery, it's a lot to ask, right? You're kind of being invited to go to these places that are quite tender. And so I trust your inner wisdom, of saying, okay, I hear you and no. And then, the tears so beautiful, like Dharma tears, whether that's just the rejoicing in this other being's goodness or a tenderness to that in you which can't feel that.
Exactly. Exactly. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, John. Yeah. Anyone else? So wonderful to hear from you. Thank you, Stephanie. I see it was wonderful to have this focused time to really feel joy through these different ways of imagining. Yeah. And, um, it's really so efficacious to bring to mind joy, right? We want to kind of get the joy through the direct experience of it. I'm all for that. It's not always available. Not always available, right? And the simple definition of samsara is chasing after it endlessly when it's not available. But we actually do have our memory always available to us. Well, for most of us, most of the time. We have enough memory that we can bring to mind these enjoyable events and savor them. And when I think of savoring, this term used a lot in psychology, it's like you're turning something over in your hands over and over, like you really want the feel of it. And what's interesting about savoring is it extends and expands the joy that we had. So it came to mind to me, I was very lucky to get out the door early this morning for a surf, and I had just a blast. Caught a couple waves that were so fun, such delight. And then imagining that delight, it's right here again. And actually, even more enjoyment is generated. Because it wasn't just that, and then the rest of the things I had to do during the day. It's like I bring more real estate to that experience by imagining it here. And one of the research studies I did in my postdoc was having very highly stressed people, burnt out people working in healthcare, track their emotion every day for 2 weeks. And they were all quite surprised at the incidence of enjoyment they felt. They were very accustomed to recognizing the burnout, but less accustomed to recognizing when they felt good, happy. So over half of our respondents, it was 11,000 respondings that we got from their phone from 100 people over 2 weeks. Over half of them were enjoyable episodes, moments where they just felt good, listening to music, walking to work, enjoying a patient encounter. And this was surprising to them when we did the follow-up interviews. They didn't know that they felt okay so often. But that mindfulness of emotion throughout the day provided that opportunity for them to savor and to kind of create that bigger amount of real estate. Because very often, we have this both recency bias and negativity bias. So when I ask most people, especially people who experience burnout at the end of the day, how was your day? Horrible, so stressful. We've forgotten all these like moments that were okay or good even. So it's really such a powerful practice to give ourselves the time and space to recollect that goodness. Yeah, anyone else want to share about the practice? Yes, Jill or Regina, not sure.
Here we go. I have a gratitude practice with a few people,
Hmm.
and I'm finding that that's one of the gifts of it. When you go through the day and remember the wonderful things, it just is as at the end of the day that though that's what takes. Yeah. Anyway,
I
it's
love it.
lovely.
Yeah. So do you guys text each other or how do you do the
Yeah,
practice?
yeah. We text each other or email each other, and I have one with the grandson where we just send one little text to each other. And
Oh,
he doesn't do it for days, but he when he does it, it's huge joy for me.
so wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
And just like, as we've all, maybe not all, but many of us have noticed, um, our emotions are contagious, right? The fear, the rage, the despair, also the joy. Have you ever like walked into a restaurant and people are laughing and you just kind of start laughing because it's this wonderful contagion that our emotions can offer us in that positive way. Okay, well, I will share a bit more and leave a little time at the end as well for questions. Yeah, so I wanted to dig a bit more into this topic. One of the things I already mentioned was this work by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And the Dalai Lama, it's really interesting. He kind of uses sometimes happiness and kindness um, almost interchangeably. It's as though, the purpose of our life is happiness, but actually what he means is kindness. Because really what leads to our happiness is kindness. And for him, it's very clear. Kindness or compassion, which he also uses interchangeably, it's this way to meet the world really with, maybe for those of you who are familiar with the term, with the eyes and the heart and the mind of a bodhisattva. So a warrior of compassion, someone dedicated to the service of all beings. And for those of us interested in Buddhism, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. But this is very unusual. Most of the pursuits towards happiness, most people believe they're individualistic. Even in the context of positive psychology, which is a field of psychology that's dedicated to kind of happiness and flourishing, and very often both these temporary feeling states that are enjoyable, but also the sense of purpose is highlighted as important. But there can be, kind of confused. And I see this a lot in our contemporary culture where we think happiness has to do with kind of a self-optimization orientation. If I can just get this or be that or do this, I will be happy. And you are all here on this call because you have recognized that that isn't actually a source of enduring and ongoing happiness. If it was, we'd all just be out buying stuff and enjoying things. But unfortunately, I'd say actually, fortunately, that's not the case. And there's been some critique over the years that even though positive psychology was such an important counter to traditional psychology at the time, which focused almost entirely on what was wrong with us. It was really lovely to have our pioneers like Ed Diener and Csikszentmihalyi who were focused on what's good in humans. What do we love? What's good? There almost became a pendulum swing the other way and created this phenomena of toxic positivity, a feeling like we always have to be happy. Things have to be good. which is perpetuated, of course, by advertising and generally capitalism, in which, right, they're selling us some sort of better, improved, cleaner, more beautiful, and attractive self. And it's so interesting because looking at what actually is an obstacle to our happiness and well-being is self-centeredness, just period. If you look closely for even 10 minutes, it's so plain to see that that which brings us the opposite of happiness, despair, shame, anguish, is so much fixation on ourselves and a belief that it needs to be better, should be better, wanting it to be better, fixating on what makes it better. So it's quite interesting. And there's an important distinction when we talk about joy and happiness. I mentioned it at the beginning, where the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, they call it more of an enduring state, almost a choice, a way to live, a worldview. And that's different than our kind of discrete emotions or experiences of happiness. So it's wonderful to feel all the sensory pleasures. I love a good piece of cake. I love a great piece of music. Oh my gosh, give me the warblers, the beautiful things in the world. And yet, these are all temporary and fleeting. And if we try to hold on to them, right, that grasping creates so much pain. Or if we, get a whole bunch of things we don't like. Like I think during the sit, there was two different sirens going by out my window, right? Other noises, like things we don't like. The kind of aversion towards that, it also really impedes our well-being. So these temporary states, and being able to see clearly that they just come and go instead of that like desire to hold on to them, such an important foundation for our happiness and so fundamental to the Buddhist path, right? There is such a deep understanding that our way out of this suffering, our path away from that suffering, is seeing clearly the nature of the true causes of suffering and the true causes of happiness. And the true causes of our happiness are really, compassion for other beings and creating this being as one that can easily channel that. So we need to kind of cultivate our own heart, body, and mind to be available for the joys and the sorrows that arise and for the joys and the sorrows of other beings around us. There's an interesting something that I've noticed with looking at joy and enjoyment. I got to work on a, a project a number of years ago with the Dalai Lama called the Atlas of Emotion. This is an online tool, freely available. After this talk, you can look it up, but don't look it up now, so you won't be distracted. But we wanted to chart, all the different states of emotion. And people get a little concerned because we chart the universal emotions, so the emotions that have a common signal, common expression, not all the emotions, just some of the primary emotions. So we have fear and anger and disgust, sadness and joy. And people say there's only one positive, there's only one good one. But then when you look at the whole range of enjoyable emotions, it's unbelievable. Enjoyment has so many flavors. Enjoyment includes our feeling of relief. Like, whew, I'm so glad that I didn't get that parking ticket. I see the parking meter there. Whew, God, I just made it. Relief. Enjoyable emotion we miss out on quite a lot. Then, of course, there's the excited states, bliss, ecstasy, these high arousal emotion states. And then some of us, we tend to forget or ignore contentment and peace, these lower arousal enjoyment states. So really, enjoyment, when we have looked at it in terms of a psychological study, it's at least 2 to 1, if not 3 to 1, of our other emotions. So meaning for every moment of fear, worry, anxiety, frustration, we often have 2 enjoyable episodes as well. And if you don't think that's true for yourself, I really invite you to pay close attention. Like really, really pay attention to the whole day. There's a wonderful poet I had the very good fortune to see perform last Friday at the Sydney Goldstein Theatre for the City Arts and Lectures. He's a poet named Ross Gay. And some of you may know Ross Gay. He has now written 2 books. The first book was The Book of Delights. 5 years later, he wrote The Book of More Delights, which just came out. And he gave himself the task of every single day writing a short essay on something that brought him delight. And he's not a Buddhist, but his approach to this work feels so aligned and so beautiful with the teachings. And he says that what really happens is we start to not kind of need to generate experiences that create delight, but we start to orient our attention towards delight. And again, not because you're denying or avoiding the many sources of difficulty, but because also right around the corner is that delight that's right there too. Earlier today, there was a moment when it felt like the stress of the world was too much, and I thought about Ross Gay and our time here together, and I just looked around the room, and I saw that amazing force of San Francisco, the fog coming in, and just undeniable delight. Like, wow, fog. I grew up here. Still blows my mind. It's like an architectural feature of the city, that it creates in some ways that beginner's mind, that freshness when we're looking around with that kind of porousness and, that wonder. So there's so many kind of enjoyable emotions wrapped up in when we start orienting ourselves to notice the delight that's always around us. Another poet I got to see, a beautiful poet named Ocean Vuong. Some of you may know him. And he described that the life of the poet is the beauty, is the poetry. The poem is just the artifact. And I really love that. When you see the world in this poetic way, it's like you're kind of setting yourself up for recognizing the poignancy that's right there in our life. And part of the poignancy and is that we're walking around the world recognizing all of this will change. Every single being we see, we recognize this being will die, just like me. There's a poignancy when we bring the clear seeing, so we can actually find with this delight and this joy, there's also this strain of wisdom. I mentioned earlier that when we see delight, when we recognize joy, we're actually seeing the world more clearly than if we only see the suffering and the difficulty. And there's also this way in which when we really recognize that ultimate level of truth and permanence, that there can be this, this kind of, it's not like a joy as in you're excited dancing around the room, but this poignancy, this beauty of recognizing the interdependence and impermanence of everything together. Those are like those Dharma tears, right? When we feel that poignancy of the world. Um, it's such a profound quality of our practice. And I'm sure for many of you, when we have the opportunity to have longer periods of practice, like a retreat, it's like the tears they just flow. And we're not sad necessarily. There's just this upwelling of our kind of sense of connection to the world and to ourselves, this deep intimacy with ourselves and with others. One thing Ross Gay said is when he was considering every day having to think about what delighted him, it really made him ask this question, what do I love? And I love this question. A lot of love there. I love this question. Like, what do I love? And how this can highlight us so that even if we experience something difficult, so we're reading the news about something that upsets us, and we take one moment, why does this upset me? It's because it reveals something that I love. I love justice. I love the idea of living in a just world. It's like, ooh, it hits a different note. And while I really have a lot of admiration, respect, and I see and value the importance of the full range of our emotions, it's important to also see that sometimes our anger and our fear is really a mask. It's sitting right on top of just this more fundamental tenderness. And that tenderness, really, that what do I love? What's threatening what I love? Can be such a beautiful place, and even a place of joy. When we think about, happiness, especially in the context of Buddhist practice, often a distinction that I learned from my teacher, Alan Wallace, is this difference between the hedonic and eudaimonic sources of happiness. So the hedonic is that sense-based enjoyment, that temporary pleasure. And hedonia gets kind of a bad rap. There's nothing wrong with hedonic enjoyment. We need it. The world is full of it. You don't need to deny it. However, if we build our entire world there, it will be samsara, an endless kind of rushing around trying to recreate the conditions that we got that goodness from. And the hedonic mode is kind of like, what can we take from the world? And then eudaimonia, or eudaimonic well-being, it's actually a term from Plato, is the idea of living in accordance with your highest values. It's this, what happiness do I feel through what I offer to the world? So instead of this getting, it's kind of this cultivation, enjoyment. And the cultivation of eudaimonic well-being is the cultivation of our compassion. How can we be of service? How can we feel connected? How can we do good for the world? In my Wednesday night class, we've been making our way through the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. It's an 8th century text by Shantideva. Wonderful text. And he has this quote, which I love. He's very pithy in helping us understand why the only sane response to living in an insane world is becoming a warrior of compassion. And one stanza, he says, "Those desiring to escape from suffering hasten right toward suffering. With the very desire for happiness, out of delusion, they destroy their own happiness as if it were an enemy." One more time. "Those desiring to escape from suffering hasten right toward suffering. With a very desire for happiness, out of delusion, they destroy their own happiness as if it were an enemy." This is the hedonic march over our eudaimonic well-being. Just, for many of us, it's very hard to kind of roll back the conditioning of what will make me happy is doing more and being more. And in the process of trying to do more and be more, we exhaust ourselves. We miss out on the possibility of tranquility and calm, the true sources of our happiness and well-being, clear seeing, stillness, silence. And not saying we need to be hermits and live in a cave, but saying that sometimes, that fear, that longing, that not knowing our own goodness really gets in the way. And a contemporary way that we understand this in the context of psychology is what's called the hedonic treadmill or hedonic adaptation. And this was a series of studies that was done looking, at kind of more extreme events and then also everyday events and recognizing that people quickly adapt. So one example could be trying to think, I have this water bottle. It's pretty great. It's got a little top here, right? And I could have the sense like, oh God, I really need a new water bottle. The water bottle, this thing, it leaks. So it leaked on the plane. I gotta get a new water bottle. Then I'll feel content and I'll be happy. There's this one water bottle, it's really expensive, but I think I should get it. It's gonna really make my life better. And I get all excited about it. I buy it. For like a week, I enjoy it. And then it's just my water bottle, right? We quickly adapt to kind of the material things in the world. But also, it's interesting with this kind of hedonic adaptation. This is true for people who win the lottery. A very old study, 1978. People who win the lottery, of course, in a temporary way, and especially if they didn't have their basic needs met, what a huge gain. All this money. But actually, after a period of not that many years, people return kind of to their usual sense of well-being or happiness. And sometimes that's described as a happiness set point. I think for Buddhists, we can understand that we can shift that set point. It's a choice, how we choose to live, what we orient towards. And people, also this has been a series of studies, people who have very difficult life experiences, losing a spouse early in life, having a traumatic accident that kind of sustains severe injury. Of course, people are very upset. They take a big hit, but then they return. So it's very interesting, these external circumstances, which we spend, I don't know, 90% of our time with, right? They actually don't impact our well-being at a deep level, our happiness at a deep level. I really love the teacher Sokni Rinpoche. Some of you might be familiar with him. He has this wonderful term that he uses called happiness without a reason. And he's describing this essentially our Buddha nature. He calls it essence love. That if we start paying attention and focusing on these in-between times when we're not doing things, but we're taking care of ourselves well, we're practicing, that we're actually happy without reason. It's our natural state. It's like our light just shining out there. And it's not even like believe that, like I know that to be true. And hope you all know that as well. It's a very beautiful thing to really investigate and be curious about in oneself. So I want to kind of tie it up a little. I know we have some announcements at the end, but I also just wanted to see if there's any questions here from folks. Questions or comments on happiness, hedonic or otherwise. I don't mind awkward silences. I feel like a good question or comment is coming. I'm just waiting.
This is not a question, but I just wanted to thank you for this. Well, the whole practice and this talk in particular, I think, while I've heard and experienced many of the things that you're talking about, it's just so important to have these regular reminders. And what was just going through my head was, this is the value of regular practice as well. We can always be reminding ourselves of these things, but this focus on joy has just been so wonderful tonight. So thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate that. Exactly. Remembering. Practice is just remembering. Yeah. Beck, did I see? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I love that happiness without reason. And it made me think of just when I was chopping everything for a salad tonight. There's just like a lot of simple pleasure in doing that, but I don't always notice it. I'm like, oh, I'm behind, or yeah, everything that crowds out just that pleasure. So thanks for helping me remember that.
Beautiful. Yeah. Harvesting those little moments of joy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm so delighted to be here with you all. It's yeah, I feel such appreciation for Howie and everything I have absorbed and learned from his goodness and his joy. He's such a representation of these teachings, as you all know, just his warmth and his care. And yeah, would invite any of you who ever want to come. We're in person, Mission Dharma on a Wednesday night. Come anytime. Come check it out. And if you're interested, I have a lot of meditations and audio practices online. So you're, yes, thank you so much. It's there through my website, which is a little outdated, but I'm working on it. But at least the meditations and the resources are up to date. So yeah, thank you all so much. Wonderful to be with you.
So thank you, Eve. Let me just do a couple of announcements. First, in addition to information about Eve's offerings, there's her website as well as what she referenced, the Atlas of Emotions. I have saved you that Google. And then, speaking of joy, on June 21st, there's going to be an all Sangha picnic at Golden Gate Park. And it's going to be Mission Dharma, San Francisco Insight, the San Francisco POC group, the Lower Market Sangha. And so just a day to appreciate the beauty of the city, appreciate the beauty of each other, and just have a lovely time in the park. And if anybody wants to help plan, let me know. And then on June 28th, the next Saturday, we'll have an in-person half-day retreat at the San Francisco Dharma Collective. So I'll have more information about that, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, and then I'll get you the link to the tickets and things like that. And then just one final reminder about Donna. And I hope that, when we do Donna, that we can really sort of take in the goodness of offering the Donna, appreciating, Eve's offerings tonight, appreciating, Mission Dharma, and just letting that urge to generosity just sort of kind of bubble up and feel the goodness of that. So the information on how to offer Donna is on the screen, and anything you offer will always be greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone. I have my little source of delight right here who says also thank you.
Thank you, Eve. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Good evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That was great.
What a delight. Thank you.
Hi.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Yeah.
Nice talk.
Right.
And Mary, I love your curtains. They're so joyful.
Well, thank you.
They're very joyful.
Birds and lemons and all sorts of good things on it. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Good night, everyone. Good seeing
night,
you all.
everyone.
Night, Noemi. Nope. Noemi looks a bit frozen. Okay. All right. So does anybody need anything before I close this down? Nope. Okay.